Welcome to 2nd edition Wargaming. My name's Rob, and in this video I'm going to take you through what is sometimes referred to as a card game within a game, and that is 40k 2nd edition, the Psychic Phase. Warhammer 40k 2nd edition, Psychic Phase. Originally, it was just a 2-page set of temporary rules in the main rulebook that came with the box set, and these covered about 6 powers that were to be used by all the forces, except for one which was orc only, power vomit, naturally. All the others had to be used by everyone else, and they were based on a dice roll, so 3+, 4+ to succeed. This dice roll could be modified depending on the level of the psyker. So a level 1 psyker was no modification, but a level 2 was a +1, so turning a 4+ dice roll into a 3+, and that was pretty much it. It did mention in the text that Dark Millennium was on its way and that this would change the way psychics work. And of course, when Dark Millennium, the main supplement to 40k 2nd edition, did arrive, it contained vehicle rules and some other things, but obviously the psychic powers were its main focus, and it expanded that massively. Each army or race got a discipline, a primary discipline of psychic powers. Some of them were 8, some of them only 4, but nearly all of them could use secondary and tertiary disciplines. So as long as they took one power from their primary discipline, they could take any combination from secondary and tertiary disciplines. Once your psyker had picked his powers, so a level 4 psyker would have 4 powers, the level 1 psyker would have 1 power, they would be able to use them during the psychic phase within the turn. And how they use these powers, or the amount of powers they could use, relied on the warp flux. Now, the warp flux was basically a bunch of dice that you rolled to see how many cards were dealt out between the two sides. And you had a warp deck. 1 dice per psyker was recommended in the rules. Rolled your dice, came up with the number, split it in half, odds or evens, whoever's player, whichever turn it was, would get the first card, and then you just alternate between dealing out the card, and this would give you your power, your force cards to cast powers, and it was as simple as that. Now, because of this, the psychic cards and the force cards and all the rest of it, it's often joked that it was like a card game within a game. That phase of the turn literally devolved into its own card game, and there's not really any other way to dress that up. That's pretty much what it was, or is if you still play it. It can be clunky, it also can be a lot of fun, and the aim of this video is to try and explain the psychic phase in 2nd edition. Hopefully you'll see some of the battle reports, 2nd edition battle reports that we're doing on this channel, and this will just give you an idea of what we're doing in the psychic phase. We'll just go to a tabletop view now, and I'll try and get us through it. Okay, so let's give the psychic phase a go. For that, we'll need some combatants. We'll use a Space Marine Librarian and a Chaos Cultist Magus as his enemy. Place them there just to try and help us keep track of whose turn it is. Now, they're drawn from the army lists as normal, and they can be of varying levels. The Marine can be from level 1 to 4. The Chaos Magus, I believe, starts as a 2nd level, and you can upgrade him to the Demagogue as a 3rd level. So let's just say they're both 3rd level. Now, each level means you can draw a power from your primary discipline deck. In this case, the Space Marine Librarian has a Librarian deck, and the Chaos Magus will go for the Zench deck. These are their primary decks, and many psychers in 2nd edition can draw from secondary or tertiary decks. In this case, both of these psychers can draw from the Adeptus deck. Now, you can have as many cards from the Adeptus deck as you like up to your level, your powers, but one of them must be from your primary deck. So in this case, we could say the Zench Magus has gone for 1 power, say 2, and 1 Adeptus, whereas the Marine could go for 1 Librarian and 2 Adeptus. As long as you've got at least one of your primary. Okay, for the purposes of this, we'll just stick to their primary disciplines. Now, if you have multiple psychers in your army, you have to distribute the primary decks amongst those psychers. So let's just say, for instance, the Magus has two other sort of lower powered psychers. Now, you've got no option really but to distribute your primary powers, one per psyker. But not to fear, you can use your secondary deck here to make up your full power. So the demagogue would have 3 and the other remaining psychers would only have 2. But at least everyone now has 2 powers. Let's just move that into camera. Everyone has at least their maximum amount of powers to make them effective in the game. Okay, but as I said, we'll just stick to the primary decks in this case. Okay, so once the powers have been, the primary decks have been allocated, you're randomly sort of dealt cards up to your power level. So they're both level 3. Let's give them their random powers. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. There you are. So that's them down. Now the players look at these cards, and if for any instance they're not happy with some of the cards, one or many of the cards in the deck, they can return them to the rest of the deck where they're shuffled in and then randomly deployed. So you can get your card back that you didn't want. For instance, in the Chaos Magus's case, there's only 4 cards in the entire deck. So if you return one, there's a 50% chance you're going to get it back. Okay, so let's just assume the players are happy with their powers. Now you deploy them, crack on with the game, and then you'll come to the psychic phase. And this is their chance to use the powers dictated by the warp flux. And the warp flux is taken from the warp deck. There's 36 cards in there. Force cards, nullified cards, special warp cards. We'll get into those maybe if any come up. And the number of these cards that are dealt are decided by D6. Now the rules recommend 1d6 per psyker on the board, and that's a psyker that's not been killed, gone off the board for some random reason, or is incapacitated, stuff like that. So if they're in the fight, you get a dice for them. Although you can restrict the warp cards or the warp flux to 2 dice no matter how many psychics you've got, if you want psychics to play a smaller part in the battle. Let's distribute those cards. Let's say it's the Chaos Magus's player's turn. He rolls a dice, or she. 8 cards distributed with whichever player rolled first. Of course, that means that if there's an odd number of cards, some will end up more than the other, but that's just the way it is. Okay, so we've got our cards. Now, again, if you've got multiple psychers, these cards are distributed, or kept in hand, but they're used throughout all of those psychers. And also the cards, the powers that were dealt per psycher, they're their powers. So wherever they are on the battlefield, that's where those powers have to be used. So if someone has a really handy power that you wanted over the other side of the board, well, too bad, should have deployed him better, basically. Okay, let's see what the Magus has got. His turn. Okay, 3 force cards and a nullified card. Now, the nullifiers are more for stopping the enemy powers, so we'll just put that to the side for now. We've got 3 force cards. Let's see what powers we have. Okay, let's just put them. Yeah, we've got 2 force 1s and a force 2, according to the number here. So we could use 2 to cast that, 1 to cast these, or maybe use 1 on each of them. But we can only cast 1 psychic power at the moment because it's a turn-based event. I'm going to go for Boon of Zench. For the expenditure of 1 force card, we can draw 2 more cards from the warp deck up here. So this is our first selection. Okay, so if nothing else happens, that will be successful and go ahead. But let's have a look at the librarian's hand and see if he wants to do anything about it. Now, does he want to nullify? It has a nullified card here. or would he perhaps want to hold on to that nullify card for a more powerful ability that could harm him or his side? So let's just say let him have the boon. We'll keep the nullify for now, just in case there's something nastier down the road. So that's a success. That goes on the discard pile. Now these build up until this deck is exhausted, and then they're shuffled again and reused. Okay, so boon is in place. That's been used. That can't be used again this psychic phase. 2 cards from the warp deck, thanks to boon. So we've got another nullify and another warp card. So we got a warp card back and we got an extra nullify. So not the end of the world, not too bad. But that's the Maggus's turn now. He's had that turn over to the librarian. Let's see what he's going to do. Now he's got a force 2, a force 3 and a force 1. So he's got 3 force cards. So he could cast Smite. But I'm thinking he's probably going to want to go Psychic Shield to get his defences up at this early stage in the game. So let's go for Psychic Shield. 1 force card. Get them out of the way. Is the Magus going to do anything about that? Probably, because the weaker the librarian is, the better. Plus he's got 2 nullify, so he's got nothing to lose. Let's give it a go. They're both level 3, so it's an equal roll. According to the card, 4, 5 or 6, the nullify works. Let's give it a go. Good roll, 6. So the nullify is expended. The force card that the librarian was going to use is now expended, and this power cannot be attempted again this turn. Okay, now we're back to the Magus. Let's see what he's got. Bolt of Change, Pink Fire of Zench. Okay, let's go for Bolt of Change. Let's say he's using it on an enemy force, not necessarily the librarian that stood opposite him. So he's going to fire that Bolt of Change, or attempt to. 2 force cards, ready to go. Let's see what the librarian's up to. Well, this is exactly what he kept the nullify for. Trying to keep his fellow Marines safe. He's now going to try and nullify that Bolt of Change. They're equal level again, so it's just a 4, 5 or 6. Ah, and another success. Okay, expended 2 force cards. Power can't be cast again in this psychic phase. And it's back to the librarian's turn. Now he's got his Psychic Shield was stopped, but he can't attempt it again. So maybe he's going to go... He hasn't got enough force cards for Smite, so he may as well go for Quickening. Cast that on himself or a nearby unit to really up their stats, make them more powerful. We're going back to the Magus now. Yeah, he's got a nullify. Why wouldn't he use it? Let's give it a go. 4, 5 or 6. No, so that's a fail. Nullify's on the discard. That's successful. Quickening is now in play. Now, when a power's in play, you keep this card on the edge of the board just to remind yourself that it's in play. So that was Librarian, had a successful cast there. Now, if there was multiple nullifies in the Chaos hand, you can bump down a nullify to another Psyker. So if you had 3 nullify cards, he could have a go, and then someone else could have a go, and then someone else could have a go. Normally, because you're leveling at different levels, it's going to be harder for a lower level Psyker to stop the Librarian or higher level Psyker, but it's still worth a try if you've got the nullifies. Alright, that's it. So we're back to the Chaos Magus. He's got 1 card left. Of course, he's going to try and cast Pink Fire of Zench. Librarian has 1 nullify left. He's going to give it a go. And successful. Nullify expended. Force card expended. Failed. And that is all 3 powers of the Magus done. So even if he had additional force cards, he has no more powers that he can attempt in that psychic phase. The Librarian has no more cards left, but it would be his turn, and if he had the force cards, he could cast Smite. Unfortunately, he hasn't. Now, that remains in play. quickening, so that will stay there at the edge of the board, affecting either him or the unit he cast it on. His powers will now return back to him, and you'll move on to the next phase, routing and rallying, or whatever it would be, and then you'd start the whole process again in the next turn when you get to the psychic phase. Hopefully you got a grip of the general rules on the last bit. On this one, we're going to just spice it up a little bit by adding in some wargear and some chaos rewards. Now let's have a look at the wargear. We've gone for the librarian of 4 sword. This is like other editions of 40k. It makes him more powerful. He can add his mastery, his psychic mastery level to his strength and other things like that. But it can also store a force card, which is quite handy. That allows him to keep it on him for future turns. Okay, now the demigod does have access to wargear as well, but I just thought I'd choose a chaos reward. Let's have a look. Let's go for Fortune of Zench. So this allows him to carry out a nullify even without having a card. So once per psychic phase, he can carry out nullify, and even if it's against a superior psyker of a higher level, it's still a 4+. The roll isn't modified. So that's quite a handy reward to have. Let's hope we get to see that in use. Now, so it's the next phase. Let's say it's the Marines' turn this time, and we're going to roll for the warp flux, 1 die per psyker. Oh, crikey, 11. Okay. Let's give that a go. Now it's the Marine's turn, so he'll be dealt the first card. Okay, that's 11. Right, let's have a look at the librarian. He should be able to do everything. Okay. 2 nullify, 4 force cards. Not bad. Let's have a look what we've got. Okay, so let's go for a strength of mind. 2 force cards. We'll try and cast that. Let's see what the Magus has got up his sleeve. Okay, he's got a nullify. So we'll give that a go. And successfully nullified. Expends the nullify. Expends his 2 force cards, and unsuccessful on strength of mind. That cannot be cast again this turn. We go over to the Chaos Magus. See what he's got. Boon of Zench, Bolt of Change, Pink Fire of Zench. Let's we done that last time. Let's go for Bolt of Change. 12-inch range. Let's just say he's doing it at some enemy unit. It's going to cost him 2 force cards. And of course the librarian is going to try to nullify that. It's got 2 nullified cards, so that's not an issue. Give it a go. And it's successful. Oh, put those the wrong way. Discard the nullify. Discard the force cards. That can't be cast again this turn. And we're back to the Marine player. 2 force cards. Okay, so what we're going to do now is cast Psychic Shield, but 1 force card. Now, the Magus doesn't have any nullify, but if you remember, we got the Fortune of Zench, which allows him once per phase to make a standard 4+ roll against any psychic power. So he's going to use that Fortune of Zench now, and it's successful. Force cast expended, failure to cast, can't be used again this turn. Back to the Marine. Okay, he's only got a level 3 power left. He's only got 1 force card and a nullify. So what he's going to do is do nothing. And he's going to store this force card using his force sword. So that'll be his in the later psychic phase. He can add that to any that he's dealt from the warp deck. He'll keep hold of the nullify for now in case the Magus wants to do something else. So it's back to the Magus. 2 force cards, 2 powers left. Let's go for Pink Fire of Zench against another enemy unit. Marine's got his nullify. He's going to give that a go. And it's a fail. Nullifies on the discard pile. Discard pile. Power's effective in play. Unit takes quite heavy hits. They would be resolved in the psychic phase. And then that power would not be able to be cast again this phase. Back to the librarian. He's got one force card, but he's going to hold on to that because one, he can't cast smite, and he's expended his other powers this turn. So we're going back to the Magus. Now he could cast Boon of Zench, but he'll have force cards and no powers to cast, and he has no way to store additional force cards. So let's just say he decides to leave that for now. He discards his force card for the end of the phase. And that's where we're at. Okay, guys, I hope that's nice and clear. And let's give you a rough idea of how the psychic phase works. So that was 40k second edition psychic phase. I hope you enjoyed that. It is a bit of a card game, but can be good fun on the battlefield in the context it was intended. If there's any other subjects from second edition that you'd like me to cover, then please put them in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.